This is Gareth Southgate, and this is the Three Lions podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Three Lions podcast. My name is Russell Osborne and this is an independent England supporters podcast. Well, it looks like things are beginning to loosen up a little. The Premier League, well, they've given themselves the green light. Project Restart appears to be starting on the 17th of June. Obviously though, without us as spectators in the grounds. And the Championship due to start a few days later on the 20th. My own personal opinion is that people, we're going to be all over it to start with, much like the Bundesliga, then realise quite quickly, without fans, football just isn't the same. Remember Croatia and Rijeka a few years back? Still not convinced the return of it though is quite essential at the moment, and I've pretty much considered it a closed season. And regarding international football, still no concrete news on the likes of the Nations League. Or indeed, as and when we, as fans, will be considered to safely return to stadiums. And whilst I'm not generally keen on watching reruns of games on the telly, I must say the BBC and ITV have done really well reliving the old England games, particularly ITV with the whole Euro 96 tournament. Well done, nice one. In fact, watching it gave me pangs for the old Wembley. And as some of you on Twitter and Facebook may have seen, I spent a socially distanced birthday out at the site of where the rubble from the old stadium now lies, and then went on a wild goose chase to find an old flagpole base. All good fun, although I'm not sure my wife and my daughter will say the same. But the sun shone, that's the main thing. As I say, the pictures were there on Twitter, at Three Lions Podcast. As always, thank you very much for all your feedback on the recent episodes. I've had some very kind comments of late, which have really helped me stay motivated, knowing that you've enjoyed the content that I do. I do just try not to whack these out willy-nilly. I do try and give it as much time and effort that I possibly can, which can take a little bit of time with the editing side of things. And we are fast approaching the 100th episode, so I guess I must be doing something right. So once again, thank you. Thank you very much. Now, a few weeks back, I was fortunate enough to speak with the BBC 5 Live commentator, John Murray. Now, having a bit of radio experience myself, although not so much in the commentating capacity, I was really excited to have this opportunity to speak with someone who I regularly listen to on the radio. Now, some of you may not recognise the name, but I guarantee once you hear him, you'll know who I mean. In fact, I was speaking with someone after the interview and mentioned him, and the person said his voice is chocolate. And I couldn't agree more. He was very accommodating with his time, to which I thank him very much for. You can give him a follow on Twitter, at BBC John Murray. This is our chat where we talk football, England, and spilling tea. I'd like to welcome to the Three Lions podcast one of the main voices of the BBC's Football 5 Live coverage. Please welcome to the show, John Murray. Hello there.
Hello, Russell. Very nice to be with you.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure. Someone I listen to often on the radio on a Saturday afternoon.
They keep us busy. Although obviously that's not the case at the moment. But yeah, it's normally, particularly at this time of the year, you're hearing here, there, and everywhere. So it's from that point of view, obviously, people have much more greater concerns than I have at the moment from that point of view. But stretching ahead, we thought we'd be at the Euros this summer. That's all changed as well. So it's been a dramatically different 2020 in a sporting sense to what we expected.
Absolutely. And as I say, you are someone I listen to, and this is an England podcast. and it seems a little bit odd for me to say this, but I don't listen to you when England are playing, because obviously I'm going to the games. But every Saturday afternoon, or sometimes during the week, then I do listen to the sound of you commentating on the games.
Do you know what? On a similar sort of theme, people will always ask me about tournaments and how it was in England when tournaments have been played. And I always say to them, well, in all honesty, I've done this job now for such a long time and gone to tournament after tournament that I've actually not experienced what it's like when England are playing in a tournament when I've been in England since Euro 96. So every tournament since then, I've been away at the tournament and seen all of the pictures and heard what it's like, particularly when England have done well, obviously in Russia last time. So that is something that when it does eventually happen, I'm really looking forward to being in the country when England play, whenever we get to play Euro 2020.
Yes, well, let's hope so. Be it next year, Euro 2021, but oddly called Euro 2020. That's still
that's right.
Very strange. Well, take us back to the beginning. How did you come about being a commentator to then being with the BBC and being one of the mainstays?
Well, it was something that I always had my eye on, to work in sports journalism. And, when I was at school, probably I'll tell you what did actually have a big influence on me. I came from a big sporting family, and when I was at school, played stacks of sport. And actually at my middle school, my headmaster there was a really big football fan, sports fan. And he actually set up to take us to Wembley, which was in 1979 for an England-Wales home international.
Okay.
And that was, for me, that was wow. So, and that was the first big football match I actually went to. I think I'm right in saying certainly it had a massive impact on me. So that was right back at the start of my football watching memories, and things like that. We went again the next year. That just really made my interest in sport and football and wanting to be involved snowball at that formative age. So that's what I was looking at. I was looking down that direction. Got some great advice, great careers advice at university. I mean, I was as well as playing lots of sport, I also listened, watched to so much growing up. And in actual fact, my career as advisor at university said, "Have you ever thought about radio journalism?" And I thought, yeah, that's exactly what I would like to do. And applied and got onto a radio journalism course, and that was the important step. I did that, and then from there went straight into local radio, and then into national radio and national media. So that's how it worked for me. And over the course of that, moved from mainly news when I first started out, and a bit of sport, to more and more sport, to all sport, and then moved to London's where I was doing all sport, and then began to concentrate on football when I started off as one of the commentary team at Radio Sport in the mid to late 90s. And even though I do odds of other sports as well, which I love the variety of doing that. I spend 90% of my working year, 95% on football. So that's how it works.
So, I mean, as a youngster, when you thought, okay, this is what sort of something I enjoy doing, did you ever sort of commentate in your head, or did you turn the telly down or something like that?
I think it's just the same as everyone else, really. You would commentate, and I would listen so carefully to other commentators and how they work, what I liked, what I didn't like, and same as everyone. I think same as any kids who are interested in football. I mean, we all do it, don't we? And as I always say, whenever I'm talking to people who have aspirations of getting into sports journalism and are asking about broadcasting, we always say, commentary really is, when you reduce it and bring it down, it is the very basics. Say what you see, and I think that most people are actually capable of doing that, particularly in the increasingly media savvy age that we live in now. And once you get the opportunity to do it, it's about putting the layers on top of that and making it better and better and better, or trying to make it better, and then all the various other aspects that come into it. But the actual basic commentary is very like you do when you're playing in the playground with your mates at school, which everyone does.
Yeah. Well, funny you should say anyone could do it. I did have a go a good few years ago. There was a company or a guy called, I think he's Alan March Sports, who I think does it for visually impaired people.
Yeah.
And I think he predominantly does swimming, but he'd done a course close to me just to see how it is. And of course I went there thinking, oh, I'll have a go. It'd be great to do a bit of football, or maybe I could try a bit of rugby. And he started off with the one of the boat races at the Olympics. So I sit there, and there must have been about half a dozen of us there. And I thought, right, I'm going to get into this, and because the boats are ready. And he goes, okay, so say what you see. And I'm ready to go, because I've heard other people going like 100 miles an hour, and the boat just hadn't moved yet. And I was like, okay, I've said what I can see, but I don't know what else. And there's so many sort of levels to sort of commentary as well.
I'll tell you what they do with us, Russell, as well, because when it comes to the big sort of state events, quite often the sports commentators are drafted in to help out with that. So I've done a couple of big royal occasions. I've done William and Kate's wedding. I was commentating on for part of the route of the procession. Okay. The Jubilee, the last Jubilee I did. So that's another sort of string to the bow that we have. But it comes back to, as you say, that's because that's what we do, is actually just describe things that are happening, whether it's sporting or otherwise. And I love doing that sort of thing because it's a different sort of challenge, really. But I know what you mean. I know what you mean in terms of when you get stuck in there. But bear in mind, this is what I do. I do it. Yes. I do it 2 or 3 times a week, virtually every week of the year. So it becomes second nature to you.
Is there a difference between radio and TV?
Yes, definitely. And I think very often people in production in TV and radio, do think that it's not dramatically different. And it is a strange thing to say, because you are still commentating on a football match. But while that is the case, and there are many, many similarities, and obviously you're trying to, you're talking about a football match that you're watching, it's different enough to just make your brain think about it. And I think it's often as well down to the individual as well. I think some people are actually very good at switching between one and the other. I find that I'm working to a different set of principles when I'm doing radio to how it is on TV. And there are other things as well. So in terms of the principles, obviously on the radio, you do need to paint a picture and explain to the listener what's happening, what the score is, where the ball is, what the players look like, all things that you don't need to do on the TV. On TV, you're trying to put a caption. I always think of it as if you're watching a photograph, a snapshot that's happening, a bit like in the newspaper, you'd see in the newspaper, and you're trying to put the caption underneath it. So you're trying to find the words to give a rounded version of what it is that you are seeing in front of you. While at the same time, obviously on TV, it's still very important to get the identification right. I just feel as well with radio, obviously, it's more intimate. You are naturally talking most of the time, although silence can be a great tool in radio, but for the most point, you are talking all of the time. And also there's a natural engagement when it's a commentary match between your summariser who's sitting right next to you. Whereas on TV, very often when I do it, which is a handful of times a year for Match of the Day, which are for highlights obviously in the evening, you're on your own. So from commentating, when you have someone and you have that natural feeling of having a conversation about what it is you're watching, suddenly on TV I very often get the feeling that I'm sitting here talking to myself. And it just feels, and it still feels really odd. And also with TV, naturally, you do leave gaps. So goals scored, Ray, goal scored, you say something. You naturally leave a gap. And then that's dangerous because that means you've got a little bit of thinking time there, which you don't have on the radio. So the radio is obviously all coming out very naturally. On the TV, suddenly you think, oh, thinking, what am I going to say next, sort of thing. So it's different. It's different enough. And I've never been in the position, actually, I don't think, where I've done a live match on the TV. I think that's right in saying. So I've not had that opportunity on TV to do a live match or to work with a summariser, which right. Is much more natural. So yes is the answer. It's the same, but it's very, very different.
Yeah. Well, let's go on to England, as this is an England podcast. I know you've got big feelings for England. You enjoy doing it. When did it all begin on the England front for you?
Well, as I say, as a follower of England from a young kid, and international football was a big deal for me, as I think it is, for so many kids. But I think as well from the era that I was growing up, which was in the 70s and the 80s, it was at that time where there were relatively few live matches on the television. And so the tournaments were a massive deal because it was like going from famine to feast when the tournaments came round, and it was, as it is now, suddenly it was all there and you were able to watch it all. So the World Cups were a big influence on my interest in football, and particularly growing up in the 70s, I sort of missed out that England at the World Cup only came into being for me in 82. So I was the first World Cup I was all over was 1978, and following Scotland avidly at that World Cup.
Yeah.
And strangely enough, during the course of this lockdown, as everyone's been doing, clearing out and trying to sift through shelves, I came across my Panini sticker books and my Football 78 Panini sticker book, which is almost full. I've only missed a handful of those. So there was that. As I say, the first big match that I went to was an England international. So I've always had a real feeling for international football. So for me to now get the opportunity, as I do in my job, first of all, to be able to go and cover the big tournaments, the World Cup, European Championship, that was huge for me. That for me is the pinnacle really of what I do as a football commentator. And so as I progressed as a commentator at 5 Live, I would occasionally get the opportunity to commentate on England games. At that time, Mike Ingham and Alan Green would be the pair who covered England, certainly at tournaments, but occasionally one or other wouldn't be available for whatever England game. So I got quite a number of opportunities actually to do that. And then when Mike stepped down after Brazil in 2014, then I stepped up and was one of the regular England voices from that point on. So I've been with them game in, game out. I think the only one I missed, since then is the third place playoff in St. Petersburg.
Okay.
Because we were getting ready for the final the next day. So Ian Dennis actually went and covered that one for us. So that's the only one I've missed. So I've seen it and been pretty close to it for since 2014, 6 years. Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, how does it all work? I don't want to get into the ins and outs of the BBC, but how does your day go
with England?
Yes.
Well, if we are covering England, the FA will give us a schedule of events that will be taking place over the course of, say it's a pair of qualifying matches. We'll have quite an established schedule of what's happening when the squad announcement is. So Gareth Southgate will do a media session when the squad's announced, and then the following week, usually the squad will get together. There'll be 1 or 2 media days in the build up to the first match, which will generally involve us either going to St George's Park or to Wembley, or both, usually, if it's a home match. And then obviously the match coverage on the day of the game. Very often then the next day will be free, then there'll be more interviews on the day before the next game. And then we'll obviously have the match coverage. And as well as that, all of the various commitments that we will have on BBC Radio, on whether it's on 5 Live, whether it's on Radio 4, breakfast time, the programmes in the evening. So it tends to be quite an intensive period. Almost always when England play, I'll be asked to go on to breakfast and talk about England the following morning as well. So over a course of a week or 8 days or so, it is really quite full on, as well as all of the preparation that you'll be doing as well for the matches. We usually get an opportunity as well to go on the day before the match is played to hear what the opposition have got to say and watch them train, and talk to the people who regularly follow them. So there's quite a lot in it. But I love it. I really look forward to those weeks. Which one of the phrases you'll never hear me use on the radio is to talk about an international break, because it's not a break at all for us. It actually often is more busy for us covering the international matches than it is when you're doing the regular club games.
Oh, actually, something I was going to get onto is about the difference between the Premier League and internationals, but I'll get onto that in a moment. But I was just going to also say, when you're talking about the opposition, the last game that obviously England had was away in Kosovo, and was a fantastic atmosphere. Yeah. It was a really great place. Yeah, fabulous. There are players, a few of them we're aware of, but some of them were a little unknown. It must take quite a lot of research and looking into to even pronounce some of the names, let alone find out their background and just little bits of snippets about those players.
Yeah. And who tends to be very, very useful there is our opposite numbers. And I got to know a guy called Arben, who is the TV. Have you crossed paths with him?
Yes, he was kind enough to come on. That's right, yes.
Yeah, lovely chap. And I met him in Southampton, actually. It was Southampton, wasn't it? The first game, that amazing first match between them. Someone like that is absolutely invaluable, certainly with, from a very basic point of view, the pronunciations. They will, we all help out one another in that sense. Also now, I think we're in a fortunate position very often when you do an international team, whoever it is these days, generally there'll be 2 or 3 maybe in the opposition team at least, who you will know anyway, because you'll have seen them somewhere along the line, whether it's in whether they play over here or whether you've seen them in European competition. And also so much footage available now that you can see all of that. All of the highlights certainly of the Euro matches, the qualifiers are available, so you get the chance to see the players, so you've got a bit of an idea. So it's a lot easier, I think, than it was from my forerunners, in that, if you think back to World Cups in the 80s, that very often those commentators would be turning up without the aids that we have now to see footage, and would be to a large extent going blind when they saw these teams for the first time. So very different, and certainly not as tricky as it once was, but still throws up the odd challenge. I think particularly when you see England play against some of the minnows, really, then you get an idea when that sort of footage is quite thin on the ground, and in actual fact, not a great deal of information is available about those players, even now, if you're talking about Liechtenstein, or where else have we been recently? Some of the real minnows, when you go to San Marino, for example, that sort of thing. So,
yeah. Who would have been, if you had a hero, did you have anyone you looked up to or aspired to be like?
What, football or in commentary?
Commentary.
In commentary, all of them really. Brian Moore, John Motson, certainly Barry Davis, big fan of Barry Davis, Radio Sense. I listened, as I was saying to you, Russell, I listened to so much. So I'd listened to Brian Butler, Peter Jones, and, even later, I would listen to Mike Ingham, Alan Green, before I ever met them and started working with them. people like John Champion, Peter Drury. I mean, they've all become like colleagues. These people, Jonathan Ledyard, I always remember listening to. Rob Hawthorne. Ron Jones was a big influence over me as well. Another former colleague of mine. People like Alan Parry, Ian Darke. I mean, all these people many of them I grew up listening to, and now count as colleagues and friends. So you will be as a commentator, you'll be influenced by so many of the voices that you hear, and now of course there are so many commentators that I think it's sometimes difficult to make your own way now, because there are so many different influences, and you will hear it. It's only natural that you will pick up habits and ways of the people that you work with. I mean, people like Clive Tilsley, Martin Tyler, who are always incredibly helpful whenever, when I was sort of emerging, they would have. I think that tends to be the way within the commentating community that people do help one another out. Like our TV guys, Guy Mowbray, Steve Wilson, the rest of the guys. There's quite a close association between us all.
Something that you did mention earlier, like your co-commentators, or what are they called? Co-commentators or
co-commentators, summarisers? We tend to call them summarisers. BBC Radio, we just have always called them summarisers. So that's a phrase, a word that has lasted until the current time. Am
I right in saying that is it Chris Waddle is your
Chris
general?
Waddle, yeah, Chris is often on with us. Certainly with England, Chris.
Yes,
Chris has done. I've done a lot of England with Chris over the years. Who else have I done England? I mean, Jimmy Armfield did many England games with us. We've had a variety. Chris Sutton has recently started doing England as well. But certainly Chris is the one I've worked with England more often than not.
What's it like to have an ex-professional alongside you? Do they give a different perspective to things and a different angle on how they see things?
Yeah, and generally the standard of whether it's an ex-player, ex-manager, or both that we have with us, working with us, I would pay tribute to the choices that we make, because very often they end up doing it over a long period of time and almost become broadcasters in their own right. People like, for instance, Mark Lawrenson, who I've worked with many times over the years. Mark has worked in broadcasting and the media for much longer than he did when he was enjoying his playing career, and so therefore they do as well pick up a sort of journalistic broadcaster's nous as well. They know when to say it, what to say. They know that we're not looking for them to repeat what we say. We're looking for original thoughts from them, and they are consummate professionals in doing that. I always remember Graham Taylor, of course, with England. We worked for many years, Graham always struck me as being someone who, because he'd been a manager for so many years and had been in that position when, certainly as England manager and in his club jobs, that he knows that people hang on his words. And whenever anything vaguely controversial would happen, I always thought Graham's clicked into action here, because he knows that what he says about whatever this incident is, he knows that this could potentially be picked up and used. His quotes could be used, and he'd just naturally have that switch that meant that he knew the sort of areas that he could talk about, and he knew that if he was going to criticize someone, that it would have to be well reasoned because of the potential comeback that there would be on it.
No, I was fortunate enough to meet Graham in Ukraine in 2012, and he was a lovely man.
Yeah, great guy.
But Chris Waddle as well. I do enjoy hearing Chris Waddle's side of things when he's alongside yourself for Premier League games.
Yeah, Terry Butcher. Terry Butcher has worked with us a lot over the years as well, and absolutely, you won't find anyone more committed to England than Terry. Obviously,
it bleeds for us.
But quite apart from that, he absolutely lives it. And if England get it, if we do a game with England and England get the result, then Terry's just chuffed to bits about that. I think as anyone I work with as a summariser. I mean, I remember when we did the friendly in Berlin when England won 3-2, which was a great game actually. Terry was with us that night, and with his own personal history against the Germans for England going back to 1990. Terry was. I remember particularly that night. Terry absolutely loved it.
Oh, great. And just something we did mention a little while ago, commentating on England and on the Premier League, is there a difference there? Are you doing obviously Premier League or the FA Cup maybe week in, week out, and then this international break, which you say comes along? Are there differences in the way you sort of take to them, approach them?
Yeah, because very often they are quite different sorts of matches actually. In that, there can be England matches can be quite uncompetitive. I've seen quite a lot of that in the qualifying matches that I've seen under Roy Hodgson and under Gareth Southgate, when England have absolutely breezed it, and it's become very one-sided. So they are different sorts of matches, and that's why personally I found that the Nations League, which I had great reservations about, was actually quite a breath of fresh air from our point of view. And I think many supporters felt the same way as well. There's suddenly you have these really competitive England internationals when we would be used at that time of year having maybe one-sided qualifying matches. So yes, there's a slightly different approach from that point of view. I think psychologically as well, with England, certainly when England were doing well at the World Cup, I found myself feeling quite differently as a commentator than I generally do, because I am English and I was covering England at the World Cup for the first time this last time in Moscow, in Russia, and obviously they did well. So I always, as a BBC commentator, as a broadcaster, you want to be impartial, but also conscious of the fact that for a match like that, most of the people who will be listening to us on the BBC will be wanting England to do well. So you've got to find a balance there, and also there's an emotional side about that you have to. I've found when it's England, try and manage. As well as everything, as well as trying to describe what's happening, find the right words, put across the right mood and atmosphere of what's happening. So certainly the penalty shootout in Moscow against Colombia was quite a challenge from that point of view.
Were you nervous?
I was more excited. Also for that game, did have Chris Waddle sitting next to me. So Chris, obviously with his history with penalties in England. The fact that Gareth Southgate's down there, and Gareth Southgate, the times have been pretty good for England under him. Yeah. So, we've had a good relationship with him. He's made it very different to follow England over the course of the last few years. Yet, everyone remembers what the mood was like around England going into that World Cup. There was much more goodwill than normal, and they'd reached where they had. And then suddenly it was all coming to a point with that penalty shootout where it could end here. All of that could end here. And I'm going to have to describe it. Chris is saying next to me, Gareth Southgate, who obviously had, missed the penalty Euro 96 when England went out. I'm going to have to go downstairs and talk to Gareth Southgate about how England have lost on penalties again. And it was intense from within the context of doing what we do. It was probably as intense a position that I've been in before, because of all of that, but also that kind of emotional investment that was there as well, which I don't have for 99% of the matches that I commentate on.
See, I've listened to you obviously post England games or pre-England games when you do talk to Gareth Southgate and various members of the team. And having spoken to Gareth myself, you've got a good relationship with him. It comes across.
Well, I think most people do have a good relationship with him because he's genuinely easy to get on with. And as I say, for the most part, things have gone pretty well for England under the time that he's been in charge. The things that he's had to deal with have been all of the issues. I mean, some of the issues that he's had to deal with. You kind of get to the stage where I remember saying to him once, you must be thinking, what is going to happen next? Whatever next am I going to have to deal with? So that's been, I think, the most challenging side of things has been asking the questions about the various issues that have come up, whether it happens to be, racism obviously has been something that's come up repeatedly, and has gone from bad to worse, whether you think of Montenegro, and then of course when we got to Sofia, but all the various other issues, what we're going through at the moment. I mean, last time I spoke to him, I was talking to him about coronavirus at the Nations League draw in Amsterdam just a few weeks ago. So what I would say about him is that he does have an extraordinary way of finding the right words to talk about this. So I think that as well has garnered him a great deal of goodwill. And, from his and England's point of view, let's hope that is able to continue for as long as possible. But generally, I mean, I enjoyed working with Roy Hodgson as well, who's always also very, very good to deal with post match. But Gareth Southgate has been a dream, really. I would have to say from a media point of view, to deal with Gareth is very, very good.
Well, something you mentioned there was Montenegro, and one of my questions was going to be one of what's maybe the oddest commentary position you've maybe been to. And I say that because I remember going to Montenegro and being tucked away in the corner of the stand and looking down. I think it was actually the press area rather than the commentary area, was just a little covered area with a couple of desks in it. And I thought that must be a really hard environment to professionally work, and which is why I came on to maybe asking you what's some of the strangest environments you've worked within.
I like the small grounds. So actually Podgorica was pretty good, and we were actually in Podgorica. I remember we were on the second take. So I've been there 2 or 3 times actually over the years, and it's pretty. It is pretty good there. And where we were, as long as you are relatively central at a good height and relatively close. So I quite like the small grounds, and it's actually a challenge of commentating in that in the time that I've done this over the course of the years, very often commentary positions are getting further and further and further away, which puts quite a pressure on the identification, basically, just seeing what it is that's happening and who it is that's doing it.
Is that with the sort of the advent of new grounds?
Yeah, new grounds. As many of the big international grounds as well have lots of space between the pitch and the stands. And then if you have gently sloping stands, and if they then put the commentators, towards the back of those stands, you can be a long, long way away. I remember Soccer City. I don't know whether you went there in South Africa. That was a long way away. I remember Vienna, actually, the Ernst Happel Stadium, which had been rebuilt at Euro 2012, wasn't it? Yeah, that was a long way away.
That would have been 2008, wouldn't it?
Sorry, Euro 2008.
Not wanting to correct you, but
yeah. Absolutely right. That was a long way away. Where we Brazil, many of the stadiums in Brazil were a long way away. So that's the big challenge I found more than strange positions these days. Maybe in my early days, you did get some strange positions. I remember going to places like Villarreal in the Champions League, where you end up down one end of the stadium behind a pillar, and you've got to sort of peer out from behind there. You tend not to get that so much these days, although you never quite know what you're going to find when you go to some of the more unlikely outposts. But I mean, Kosovo, for example, great little setup in Kosovo, so we had no problems there.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask: do you have a fear of maybe losing your voice? How do you prepare in that sort of way, in sort of the same way that a singer would do?
Well, that has happened a couple of times actually.
Okay.
I've lost my voice, and for a long time at BBC Radio, we would actually send two commentators to the matches. So you do 22 and a half minutes.
I always found that a bit strange.
Yeah, well, you see, I always loved it. I always loved it. And we still do it with England. So I will cover the England games with Ian Dennis, and then we'll have a summariser as well, maybe two summarisers, depending on what the match is. And I really like that setup for a variety of reasons, being that from a listening point of view, I always used to love it, because you knew that you're always less than 20 minutes away from getting another voice, another viewpoint, right, another view on how the game was developing. So that I liked it from a variety point of view as a listener, and I love it as a commentator, because you do get the opportunity to take stock for half of a half and have a look and have a think and have a listen to what your colleague is saying. So it's not an issue if you've got another commentator. So it's happened to me before when there was another commentator there. It's obviously more of an issue as happened during I think it was the season before last, the FA Cup semi-finals. My voice went towards the end of the game on the first day, and I was doing the next day and really struggled on the second day. So yeah, it's in your mind certainly, but it's a rarity that when that happens. Yeah.
I did see there's other little things that I've seen that happen in the commentary box. I saw that you spilled a cup of tea on yourself during one game,
Brentford,
didn't you?
This season, a cup of coffee at Brentford. I don't know whether you've ever been in Griffin Park, which hasn't got long to go now, has it?
Do you know what? Me and my friend, it was one of the grounds that we haven't been to. I'm not saying I've been to a huge amount, but we bought tickets to go to Griffin Park in the fact that it was its last season, and we'll never get that chance. I've still got the ticket, but I can't go.
What a shame, because that is a great little ground, but the commentary position is very, very tight, where you sit there and it had like the benches slightly leaned towards you, and we were jammed in. I had all the kit in front of me, my pad, and I remember the producer George got me a cup of coffee at half time, and it was a big cup of coffee, and I just put it on the top. And I remember thinking, is that going to stay there? It had been too hot to have drunk too much out of. And then, of course, we start, and I must have just leaned into the bench, and then the next thing I knew, it just poured right down. It was almost like a funnel down into my lap, and it was quite hot still. So, but it wasn't by the end of the game.
Ouch, yeah, I bet. Well, I mean, are there any sort of anecdotes that you could share with us from just being with the England setup? Anything that sort of makes you smile or you think have been important in your time?
I think, that quarter final, I beg your pardon, the last 16 game in Moscow was a real. That's right up there of all of the experiences that I've had, whether it's international, whether it's England or not, just everything around that game. That was a great commentary position, by the way. Right. We were in quite low and quite central, so we had a great view. And actually, the penalties took place towards our end as well. So when that was at least a big help. I think, when you talk about my experiences with England, what I would say is that tournament was, I saw the film about Bobby Robson just before that tournament, and to those of us of a certain age, that Italia 90 tournament was, such fond memories of watching that and what England were able to do in 1990. And I remember watching that beforehand in the build-up to that World Cup, and seeing everything that went around it and England's progression and getting through to a World Cup semi-final with a chance of getting into the final, and then winning. And then myself covering England in Russia, it felt almost like as that tournament progressed that I was living out what I remembered from 1990 and what I'd only recently watched. And as it went on, that building feeling of how far can England go in this tournament, and also finding myself commentating on the matches, and then, like, as I say, going downstairs, talking to the England manager about the team qualifying for a World Cup semi-final. And I remember in the Luzhniki in the semi-final, after the first half, and England were winning at half-time, and I remember at half-time thinking, they are going to win this. They're going to win this game. And on Sunday, we're going to be commentating on England in the World Cup final. And, clearly, obviously, it didn't work out that way. But the whole package, if you know what I mean, being involved in that and almost thinking, like, going back to the Bobby Robson film, thinking, I feel like I've now been transported into that film. And if I watch a documentary about this in 20 years' time, there's every chance that there's me there, just that's, I think, gives you in a nutshell, or not so much a nutshell, gives you an idea of what a thrill it can be doing the job that we do and getting a chance to be so close to something like that. So yeah, that's the memory. And contrasting that to Euro 2016 and seeing England knocked out by Iceland, was very, very different. So even in the two tournaments that I've covered England, to have two such huge contrasts like that are great memories in different ways.
Yeah. Well, for anyone that hasn't seen that Bobby Robson film, it's a wonderful film to see. Yeah. John, thank you very much for your time there, and let's hope that come next year we can just go that step further, and you really can be in the hot seat in the final.
Yeah, well, I think that I think genuinely we were quite positive, weren't we, about what England might be capable of this summer. Certainly, if they'd been able to replicate the form that they were showing towards the end of last year in those matches, when almost game after game, I have to say, I was sitting there thinking England would give pretty much any team a game at the moment. So we'll see. Who knows who'll be in form, what'll have happened by the time we eventually get to the next tournament. So we'll just have to wait and find out. But yeah, let's hope it comes back sooner rather than later.
Yes, well, I look forward to hearing you again on the radio, hopefully very soon.
Good stuff. Thanks, Russell.
There, really enjoyed that one. Real privilege, and I hope you did too. Once again, thanks to John there for his time, and I look forward to hearing him on the radio very soon. And I know it won't be an entirely new experience for him, as I know he was behind the microphone for that time in Rijeka in Croatia for the game Behind Closed Doors. As always, thank you for listening and your kind comments. As always, please do spread the word. We're on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Just search Three Lions Podcast. And I've got some more episodes coming up. I know, the month of June, I was anticipating it being a real busy one. Pods from all over Europe, what with the European Championships due to have been played. In fact, about this time, I should have been doing one, reflecting back on our trip to Austria for that friendly. Ah, dear. Shouldn't think too much about it. We'll do it all again next year. Anyway, as I say, more episodes coming your way this month, so please do stay subscribed and, of course, stay safe too. So until the next time, cheers!